December 7, 1941, dawned clear and bright over Pearl Harbor, a day that would live in infamy, or so history dictates. But in this reimagined timeline, fate took a different turn. The meticulously planned Japanese attack designed to cripple the US Pacific Fleet met with unexpected failure. Faulty intelligence, mechanical errors, and resolute American vigilance combined to thwart the surprise assault. Instead of fiery chaos, an eerie calm settled over the Hawaiian waters. The immediate impact was the survival of the US Pacific Fleet, a crucial factor in the Pacific theater of World War II. The nation, though spared the devastating blow, found itself abruptly shaken from its isolationist slumber. This was a wake-up call, a stark reminder of the global realities the nation could no longer ignore. The failed attack on Pearl Harbor became a turning point, not for immediate war, but for a different kind of American awakening. It set the stage for a world on the brink of conflict to grapple with a new reality, a United States awake, wary, and ready to assert its presence on the global stage. News of the failed attack on Pearl Harbor, while not leading to immediate declarations of war, galvanized the United States into action. President Roosevelt, the weight of a nation's expectations on his shoulders, addressed Congress and the American people. His words, measured yet resolute, spoke of preparedness, vigilance, and the need to bolster national defense. Instead of a full-fledged declaration of war, Roosevelt called for a massive expansion of the US military. The draft was reinstated, industries were mobilized for wartime production, and defense spending skyrocketed. The nation, still reeling from the surprise at Pearl Harbor, threw itself into preparing for a future conflict that seemed all but inevitable. This measured approach to the Japanese threat had significant implications for US foreign policy. It could prioritize its strategic interests, focusing on containing the Japanese threat in the Pacific while providing limited aid to its allies in Europe. The nation underwent a rapid transformation, shifting from a peacetime economy to a wartime footing. Men and women from all walks of life answered the call to serve, joining the ranks of the rapidly expanding military. The failed attack on Pearl Harbor proved to be a strategic blunder of immense proportions for Japan. The element of surprise, crucial to their plans for a swift and decisive victory, had been lost. Instead of facing a demoralized and crippled opponent, they now faced a United States more determined than ever to thwart their ambitions. The prolonged conflict, which Japan had desperately sought to avoid, took a heavy toll on their resources. The US Navy, bolstered by the industrial might of the American mainland, slowly but surely turned the tide in the Pacific. Japan, heavily reliant on imports, found itself increasingly strangled by American naval superiority. The military leadership, which had staked its reputation on a short and victorious war, faced mounting criticism as the conflict dragged on. Public opinion, initially supportive of the war effort, began to waver as the economic realities of a protracted conflict set in. Without the shock and outrage of Pearl Harbor, international condemnation of Japan's actions was more muted. Section 4, Europe's War, Europe's Victory, a world without American intervention. Across the Atlantic, the war in Europe raged on. Without the immediate entry of the United States into the conflict, the dynamics of the war took a drastically different turn. Great Britain, standing alone against the Nazi war machine, faced an even more perilous struggle for survival. German U-boats, emboldened by the absence of American naval power, wreaked havoc on British shipping. The island nation, heavily reliant on imports, teetered on the brink of starvation. On the Eastern Front, the Soviet Union bore the brunt of the Nazi war machine. Without the massive influx of American resources and manpower, the war in Europe became a brutal war of attrition. The outcome, far from certain, hinged on the ability of the Soviet Union to withstand the Nazi onslaught. Section 5, A New Pacific Order, The Seeds of Change in a Post-Colonial World. The ripple effects of a failed Pearl Harbor extended far beyond the immediate conflict. In the Pacific, the absence of a devastating war and a diminished Japanese empire created a unique opportunity for change. The seeds of decolonization, already sown in the minds of many, found fertile ground in the shifting global landscape. European powers, weakened by the war in Europe and facing growing unrest in their colonies, found it increasingly difficult to maintain their grip on their overseas possessions. The United States, while focused on containing Japan, also played a role in shaping the post-war order in the Pacific. This combination of factors led to a wave of independence movements sweeping across Asia and Africa. Countries like India, Indonesia, and Vietnam, inspired by the weakening grip of their colonial masters, rose up to demand self-rule. The Pacific, once a battleground for empires, was poised to become a stage for new nations to emerge and redefine their place in the world.